Welcome to MarcusG.tv. I'm Chef Marcus Giuliano. I'm a chef on a mission. Today's mission is salmon, farmed salmon. Why is farmed salmon bad for wild salmon? I can remember as long as I can being a chef and buying from seafood companies and reading trade journals and learning about the food in general, about buying food, that I've always been taught that buying buying farmed salmon saves the wild salmon because you're not eating the wild salmon, and that's what you need to do to replenish the stocks. And this is what seafood distributors tell us chefs, that it's very important to keep buying farmed salmon. So, and the last big company that told me that was Slavin Foods when I worked, Slavin Seafoods, Slavin Fish actually, when I worked in Westchester County, just outside New York City. Slavin Fish, Barry Slavin would argue with me and tell me, you need farmed salmon to keep the wild salmon population growing higher and higher. It's absolutely necessary. And here's the reality of it. The reality is that farmed salmon actually can detriment the wild salmon. Now here's an article that I'm going to read, current news, August 2016, from Norway, about Norwegian salmon. But the general premise is that you have these dirty salmon farms, and a lot of them are placed around the world in the migratory paths or the where wild salmon live, because that's where salmon grows the best. Well, what happens when the disease, the sea lice and everything get into the ocean, and all the excrement and all that filth and all the disease and viruses and flus, that gets transported right to the wild salmon, and the wild salmon can't handle all of that pressure, all of that toxicity, and it diminishes their population. If you want to look at somebody who's dedicated a lot of research to that, go to Alex Morton. Alex Morton on Twitter. It's Alex4, the actual 4, Alex4 Salmon on Twitter. She is a marine biologist in British Columbia that is studying the disappearing wild salmon, and all these wild salmon disappearing are in the direct path, the migratory paths of these salmon farms. So she's pointed a direct correlation of these farms. So now in Norway here, now this is as well as all over other places all over the world where they farm salmon. Article out of Norway: fish farm escapees are weakening Norwegian wild salmon genetics. Someone might say, oh, wild salmon from Norway, I didn't know they had that. See, the Atlantic Ocean does have wild salmon, but there's not nearly enough of a big population to actually fish it commercially. I think there's 1 or 2 small pockets in Scotland where they can actually go out and catch like 157 metric tons or something of wild salmon once a year. But that salmon is super, super expensive. And there's really nowhere else in through Norway. You've been thinking they've been farming fish in Norway since the 60s. Why isn't there enough population of wild salmon to start fishing yet? Duh. So there is wild salmon in the Atlantic. There's just not enough of it to serve commercially and to catch it commercially like that and serve it in restaurants. So whenever you see wild Atlantic salmon on somebody's menu, it is a fraud, total fraud, unless they're buying that super expensive salmon from Scotland that I just spoke about, but that's really not happening in an American restaurant. So, this is from mongabay.com. Norwegian scientists conducted a genetic analysis of almost 22,000 wild-caught juvenile and adult Atlantic salmon from 147 rivers, a geography sampling representing 3/4 of the Norway salmon population. So they went all over Norway, 147 rivers, went all over and sampled the genetics of the so-called, the wild salmon that's actually left out there, the little wild salmon that's left out there. The researchers found genes from farmed salmon in every wild population they tested, and significant genetic mixing in nearly half of the rivers they sampled. In fact, one of the rivers had almost 43% genetic makeup of farmed salmon in the wild salmon. That means that fish had almost one full parent that was a farmed salmon. See, farmed salmon can escape through holes, they can escape through high tides, or through storms or whatever. There's a lot of different ways that these salmon can escape into the ocean. One of the biggest arguments of salmon industry is that the whole system is just wrong to begin with. So sure, if a salmon farm says we don't use antibiotics, we don't use growth hormones, we serve this great food to them, this and that, there's still the chance that their salmon are still getting diseases, and that their salmon is still getting out into the wild, to crossbreed. So it's happened all over Norway. The wild salmon have infiltrated the population. The extensive genetic introgression documented here possesses serious challenge to the management of farmed and wild Atlantic salmon in Norway, and in all likelihood in other regions where farmed salmon escape events occur regularly. So farmed salmon is made to, it's not made to reproduce, like, it's not made the same way as wild salmon's made. This is a hybridized salmon, and now in certain parts it's a genetically modified salmon, which is a total disaster if those things get out into the wild. So these crossbred salmon are bred for their meat. They're not bred for reproduction values. They're not bred for things that the wild salmon possess and need to live. They're also bred to have spawning later in life. So when these salmon get out, they're competing for the same food as the wild salmon, the farm salmon, and they're crossbreeding, and they're making that wild salmon strain that much weaker. So don't kid yourself if you think that you're eating a farm salmon and you're saving wild salmon. There's a couple websites that actually say that. Another wild salmon saved because you ate our farm salmon. That is a total line of BS. Total lie, downright lie, very manipulative. If you look at like the milk industry, all the tactics they've done to sell this basic cow juice, which when you think about it is so unnatural, the same things they employ in farm and salmon farms, the same kind of tactics, the same kind of, and I've got to tell you, I've had many of these so-called farm salmon advocacy groups after me on Twitter and after me on YouTube and trying to get my videos pulled, because those are paid for by the salmon farms themselves. They're either the salmon farms themselves or they're these consortiums that are set up by the salmon farming industry. And I've had a lot of harassment. I haven't had any in a while, but a couple years ago I sure did. Oh my gosh. And these people go in and attack you and try to discredit these, like this article that I would post, they would totally discredit me and call me the loser and this and that. And I'm just reading an article that I found. And I'm just reposting an article I found from Twitter. If I retweeted this article, they would have gone after me. That hasn't happened in a while, but they are very ruthless people because they're trying to sell something. They're trying to sell you something that has false hopes, that may have disease, that may be loaded with a lot of other crap. There's report after report after report that Norwegian salmon, Scottish salmon, and Faroe Island salmon are the most toxic food in the world. Not just the most toxic salmon, but the most toxic food in the world that you shouldn't be eating. Now they're having a problem with so-called organic farm salmon in Norway. So there is no USDA regulation for organic salmon. So when you see the word organic salmon on somebody's menu, a sushi menu or something, that's a total line of BS. 100% total lie. It's a self-regulated term in the seafood world. Organic is self-regulated. So they do what they want, but their own regulations, their own rules that work for them, and they call their fish organic and put a higher price tag on it. And then you go to a sushi restaurant thinking, oh, I'm eating this organic salmon or this or that. False, false, false. That salmon, even the best salmon in the world, like Loch Duhart, the farm salmon, these salmon farms. Loch Duhart, cooked salmon, these aquaculture, these big names, websites that you go on, how everything's so pristine. They still get fish diseases. They still have to kill fish by the millions sometimes in these nets, in these pens. They're still cramped fish. They're still crossbred fish. It's still farmed salmon when you're done with it, no matter what these websites say. So buyer beware. I'm Chef Marcus Giuliano. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos, please hit like, subscribe to my channel, and definitely pass it on. Head over to my website, www.nofarmedsalmon.com. There's documentaries there, there's videos, there's links, there's articles. You can connect with Alex Morton there. I have her information on that website. So head over there, nofarmedsalmon.com. I'm Chef Marcus Giuliano. Thanks for watching.